So welcome back, dear participants, and welcome new participants, especially Gus Casely-Hayford, the director of V&A East. Still with us is Benita von Maltzahn, director of global cultural engagement at Volkswagen Group. And I would like you to explain just in a short moment to how you can participate in this deep dive. You can use your direct audio in this webinar by clicking raise your hand. You can also ask the question in writing in the chat in this webinar, or you use your online form at campus.republica.com, and we can include those questions as well. I would like to start out right away with a short reaction by Benita to Gus's talk and to the sprint that we just heard.
Hi, Gus.
Good evening, Benita.
It's really lovely to meet you, especially because I've had so many times with Martin talking about the V&A East. He wasn't only passionate about it, but I think it was, which he definitely was, but it was of great importance to him what this museum could be, should be, where a museum should be going. So it was really exciting for me to hear what you were saying, because you know, all these ideas that Martin had, I think in the end definitely are coming out to what you will be producing, I think. I think the idea of you telling us about the history and where we come from and what museums were done for, and you said, you know, government sort of, it reflected what governments tell us to do a little bit, and that we need to be more open about that, and that it needs to reflect everyone's wishes and ideas and thoughts. Yeah, I mean, Martin already, I think in the V&A and with Martin at the V&A was something where he always did something new, something, for me, one experience was a project I did with him. He did an exhibition called The Season of Engineering. And so, of course, he came to Volkswagen, but he said, you know, everyone says designers are artists. Why is an engineer not an artist as well? An engineer is a designer. So, you know, this is something I think which is fascinating, to always start something new, and that was important to him. So listening to you about what your ideas now are for V&A East, I'm really, really excited about it. And yeah, maybe you can just tell a little bit more about, yeah, you said it needs to reflect the whole, you know, it needs to shift, it needs to be different. What exactly are we going to be experiencing? I know there'll be a storage house of art and design, there'll be lots of galleries, but what are you going to do to exactly what you said, to get everyone more involved, to come there and to experience what they should be experiencing, what you are hoping for them to experience?
I only had the privilege of meeting Martin on 2 occasions. And the second occasion was when I was actually part of a panel that was awarding the Museum of the Year. And we had to select from a huge number of different museums. It was difficult because the pressure was not to give the prize to another London museum, but Martin's V&A was such a compelling institution with a narrative which really, it speaks even now, a number of years later, to our time. And the way in which Martin expressed what he saw as the ambition of museums, it really spoke to me in a very powerful way. And it's the thing which I quietly carry with me, is that sense that museums are more than just repositories of objects, more than just spaces in which we display and tell the stories of our histories and particularly our victories, but that there is this opportunity for us to actually engage in transformation of communities, to bring new communities into debates about who we might be, what we might be, how we might actually forge a new positive agenda which might be shared. And it's that really inspired me in thinking both about applying for this job that I was working up until fairly recently in America at the National Museum of African Art. But this role, which would be standing on the shoulders of a true giant of our sector, Martin, and forging something which would fulfill that incredible ambition that he had of speaking to wide audiences in ways that would actually liberate them to reflect back to us the possibilities for our discipline. And that was the thing that really inspired me. And that is what we have tried to engender in our initial vision for this institution, as a crucible of possibilities, a space in which we can come and we can actually remake disciplines in ways that will really empower the visitor. And for many people who live in and around that bit of London, they may never have engaged with a museum in the sorts of ways that we do on a regular basis. And so we wanted to find ways of changing their lives. Sorry, I'm sorry.
And give the audience a chance to ask a question. We have one question by Katarzyna, who wants to ask a question via audio.
Thank you very much for your passionate and inspiring talk. And my question, today's session is a lot about meeting expectations of current societies and about empowerment. It sounds doable to me for a small or medium-sized museum. And V&A is one of the greatest museums in the world, especially once the V&A East is open. So what, in your view, is possible to be done at this scale, and what is not?
These are good questions. And I do think for us that we are both a national and a local institution, that we are surrounded by some of the most economically challenged regions of Britain, some of the most diverse and also culturally inspired as well, but also economically, that these are people who face enormous challenges. And part of the reason that both local and national government have invested in our institution's idea of placing both our new collection centre, which will hold 250,000 objects and 900 archives, and also a new museum which will be local to it, which will be a space in which we will explore not just those collections, but also special exhibitions on all sorts of different areas which celebrate making. That will be a 4-story new building, which is designed by Liz Diller. That these two institutions, that we are hoping that they will become spaces that give those local people a sense of both the possibilities of design and a way of interacting with the best global practice, but also spaces in which they can realize some of their own dreams. A collection center which can be used as a resource, a source book for inspiring their own ideas. But we also have a national responsibility. And I want to speak to that because we have limited resource. I want to speak to that national responsibility through digital tools, through partnerships, and also through thinking of ways in which we work actively to loan our collections. But beyond that as well, we are in this incredibly diverse bit of London, and we need to find ways of bringing practice from across the globe that reflects that complexity and speaks to that demographic complexity. And so we will be working with partners from around the world in engaging in developing program, bringing artists, bringing academics and curators into our space to reshape our ideas. So I see us as being both a global and also a local institution that will try to deliver, whether it be through exhibitions or digitally, the sorts of things which will particularly engage a younger audience. And within that, I would see success only as measurable in the way in which we actually reflect the diversity and demographic complexity of London, and particularly the local boroughs around the institution.
I would like to ask another question by John, who asked through our online tool. In your sprint, you talked about a flat or flattened narrative that needs to be changed. I share your opinion, but how can that be actively changed? How do museums contribute to that narrative shifting?
Well, we're very fortunate in which we have this incredible collection of amazing material culture that can tell all kinds of stories that, of course, those stories can be authored by curators, by historians who can underpin those objects with very rigorous research and information. But around that are also the possibilities for us to engage in conversations about these objects, potentially as objects of utility, of inspiration, of lust, of hate, potentially, but to dynamize the space around those objects with wider conversations which will engage all kinds of people. So what I would love is that we build a nexus of conversations around our collection, which is not controlled by us, but which is something which is co-curated and shared with our audiences. And the great thing about that digital space is that it need not just be people who come and visit, that it could be the practitioners who have created the traditions that have evolved into our actual objects, or it may well be people who have been inspired to use those objects in changing their own practice. And so I would want this to not just be a repository of objects that one comes and looks at, but as a catalyst for a kind of dynamic dialogue with all kinds of creative communities across the world. And in that way, it may well be an institution that is based in East London, but I would love it if the peoples of Berlin, the creative communities of Berlin, could be using it as a resource for inspiring their practice, for conversations with people working in similar areas of practice. And I think in that way that we can dynamize our collection, which tells 5,000 years of history in ways that speak to this moment and also which inspire the future.
I would like to include one more question before we have to come almost to an end of this deep dive, because it comes by Giovanna, who was asking through our chat, and she's also referring to your audience. She asks if you can talk more about the communities living around V&A East, who are, as you said, some of the poorest in London and the UK, many of whom were also displaced by the 2012 Olympic Games and subsequent gentrification. So how can you make your venue really accessible and appealing to them?
Yeah, and it is a challenge, and that I've spent quite a bit of my summer holiday cycling in the 4 boroughs which surround our site, and they aren't communities who have enjoyed the benefits of state-sponsored culture for the most part. You know, these are people who are engaged in culture in a variety of different ways, but they pay for their culture. That these are people who are probably least able to do so, but we don't give them the benefit of subsidized culture. And so one of the ways in which I feel that we can actually speak to them is that these are some of the youngest communities in London as well, is through schools and through colleges, is that if we can get in both formally through the curriculum, but also informally through building networks within those schools to speak to those communities and hopefully draw them into more than just being visitors, but being participants in helping us to think about our programs. And then beyond that, wanting them to be advocates, ambassadors on the institution's behalf, to draw in maybe their parents, their relatives, so that they become our evangelists, our stewards within our institution. And we have a family of people who have an affinity with our institution and feel that, I think, like so many of us from ethnic minorities, that a museum visit may not have been a natural thing to consider as part of a recreational choice, but to make these institutions feel so natural to that generation that they will want to come and demand that it is remade in ways that they will love. And that's what I really want this space to be, is to be a space that will be a crucible for the imaginations of that younger generation, many of whom are going to reformulate disciplines in ways that are beyond our conception. But I want them to do that within our spaces as well as beyond it. I want us to be able to reflect the changes that are about to come, because I get the sense that Gen Z, that they aren't going to want the world to remain in stasis, that they want to see it change. And we want to be an institution that reflects that change, that dynamism.
I think that's also, for me, that's a great ending for this deep dive. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Just one more question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, take your time.
Do you already know when you'll open?
It's 2 buildings. So the collection center, which holds the 250,000 objects and 900 archives, that will be open 2023, possibly a year, 8 months to a year later, the museum site. So, you know, please, if before that point that you are in London, do look me up. And if there are ways that we can get you in to see the buildings as they transform into their complete state, do come and see, because they are both beautiful buildings.
Thank you.
So that was a very nice ending as well, and a great invitation. So thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you for being, to the 2 of you, for being part of the Mars program. The Mars program continues on the stream on our website and on YouTube with the Future Forward panel. I think a great lookout to MuseumFutures by upcoming museum shapers. Today, Yvette Mutumba, whose print you already saw, editor-in-chief at Contemporary End, is with us, as well as Yara Haridi, a PhD student at the Museum für Naturkunde. Thanks to the 2 of you again. Have a nice evening and have fun with the rest of our program.
Thank you.